Last year, Americans swiped their credit and debit cards over 250 billion times. Almost every single transaction, the coffee you bought this morning, your last online order, the parking meter you paid for last week, sent a small cut to one of two companies, Visa or Mastercard. Together, these two companies process about 90% of the world's non-cash payment volume outside of China. They employ fewer people than a mid-sized regional bank. And they operate at higher profit margins than any other company in the S&P 500, higher than Google, higher than Apple, higher than Microsoft. So how do two companies that don't hold your money, don't lend you money, and don't build any physical infrastructure become the most profitable businesses in the S&P 500? Most people assume that when you swipe a card, Visa or Mastercard takes the entire fee. That's the mental model. Visa charges 3% to the store. That's how they make money. That's actually wrong. When you swipe a card, an average of about 2.36% of the transaction gets skimmed off before the merchant sees the deposit. But that 2.36% doesn't all go to Visa or Mastercard. The largest chunk, about 1.65%, flows to the issuing bank as interchange. The bank collects it as compensation for extending you credit and eating the fraud risk. Another chunk goes to the acquiring bank or the payment processor. And Visa or Mastercard's actual cut? Roughly 14 cents on every $100, 14 cents per $100. That's it. And yet, these are the highest margin large companies in the world. So how does 14 cents make Visa 67% operating margins? Here's the trick. Visa processed $14 trillion in transactions in fiscal 2025. Mastercard processed roughly $7 trillion. On that volume, even a fraction of a percent adds up to tens of billions of dollars a year. Visa's total revenue last year was around $40 billion. Mastercard's was around $30 billion. And unlike a bank, they don't lend anything. They don't hold deposits. They don't take credit risk. There are no defaults, no bad loans, no capital requirements, no branches. Their entire cost structure is a bunch of software engineers, some data centers, and the periodic legal settlement. That's the mechanism. Small cut, insane volume, near zero variable cost. But it doesn't explain why the mechanism holds. Why doesn't Mastercard undercut Visa? Why hasn't anyone new broken in? The answer is that Visa and Mastercard aren't competitors. They're a rational duopoly. Economists have a specific term for this, a rational duopoly. Two firms who could theoretically compete on price choose not to because each recognizes that undercutting the other would trigger a race to zero. Instead, they charge nearly identical fees, offer nearly identical value, and quietly split the market. Visa and Mastercard do this at a global scale. They compete against cash, against checks, against wire transfers, against friction. They don't compete against each other, because if either one won decisively, the government would step in and break the survivor apart. So they cooperate through complete price alignment. And here's why the duopoly is so hard to break. The banks protect it. Every bank that issues a Visa or Mastercard collects that 1.65% interchange on every swipe. That's one of the most reliable revenue streams in modern banking. If a challenger tried to build a cheaper alternative, as PayPal did, as several crypto projects did, as every buy now pay later company has done, banks have no incentive to switch, and most of them end up running on Visa or Mastercard rails anyway. Even government regulation has failed to crack this. In December 2025, Visa and Mastercard agreed to a $200 billion settlement with US merchants over swipe fees, the largest antitrust settlement in American history. Their combined stock market cap barely moved because the settlement didn't touch the underlying structure. It just capped some rates temporarily. The rails remain, the banks remain incentivized, the tolls keep flowing. Every challenger, every regulation, every technological disruption. All of them have been forced to either run on the Visa/Mastercard rails or die trying to build alternatives that never scale. So when people see a Visa or Mastercard logo, they think credit card company. That's not what these are. Visa and Mastercard don't issue cards. They don't lend money. They don't take deposits. They're the mandatory toll booth between almost every buyer and seller in the modern economy. The bank pays them a tiny fee for each transaction. The merchant pays them a tiny fee for each transaction. And when you multiply tiny by hundreds of billions of transactions a year, you get one of the most profitable businesses in the history of capitalism. The genius isn't the technology, it's the network. And once you own the network, everyone else has to build around you. If you want to see how other companies utilize similarly clever business models, hit subscribe.